Hello and welcome to Finextra. I'm Hannah Wallace and today I'm joined by Thomalla from ACI Worldwide, and we're going to be discussing real-time payments in both the US and Europe. Paul, it's great to have you here again.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So last time we had you here, we were talking about the 4 roadshows around real-time payments you participated in, but of course a lot can change in 6 months. Can you tell me how the issues you raised last time have changed and where the discussion has gone since?
You know, I think since we did the roadshows, I mean, you know, as you say, it's only 6 months, but, you know, it's a long time in this part of the industry. I think what has happened is people have really started to think through what are the consequences, what do I need to do, how do I address it, how do I look at it internally, and as well, what's happening outside. So we've seen some interesting stats. We're seeing that in the US, 35% of consumers and 65% of SMEs. And in Europe, we've got 40% of consumers and 74% of SMEs saying they would change if their bank didn't offer them real-time services. And I think it's interesting to look more at the SME side of this, who are effectively looking at it as a business and saying, hey, if I could do this as a consumer, why can't I run my business like this? And for them, of course, it's probably relatively easy compared to a big corporate to make that change, although a lot of the corporates are thinking down that road as well. However, if you're an SME, you're kind of in the business stage without having to do all the work that a big corporate would have to do. So I think there is a lot of change going on. We're seeing a lot of clamoring for how do I get involved? How do I get started? And I think that's going to be a big part of the next tranche of the conversation that we're going to have.
That's very interesting. And along the way, what similarities did you find between the US and Europe, especially in the fintech space?
I think that what we see now is Europe and the US in a very similar place. A very similar place. A lot of change happened, but similar places. However, I do think that the whole conversation about the fintechs has changed a lot. It used to be about small companies trying to change the world. Now what we see is relatively large companies trying to make change happen, but from a size point of view. However, I would make the point that really that's interesting, but it's not as interesting as what we see from Asia. You know, China is moving at a pace that Western world just isn't. And really that's to do with legacy. You know, the Western world has a lot of legacy systems that's been in place for 30, 40 years plus. Asia doesn't have that problem. It's taking the best from what's happened in the world and it's leaving the rest, and it's moving at a pace. That's the similarity that everyone's focused in on.
And how about on the regulation side? Are you finding similarities there?
Well, not really, no. I think the similarities are in effect, arguably, between Asia and Europe. So Europe has a very strong regulatory culture. We're saying you've got to do this, you've got to do that, etc. And in Asia, what they've done is they've said, hey, you can't come in. We're going to allow our own players to move at a pace. And they have, and that's very clear. In the US, the regulatory space is relatively weak compared to those 2 major regions, and they're looking at it more from, you know, how can I make money out of this? What's the absolute commercial benefit? Now, they're very different, but the biggest calling card in town right now is the regulator says, I've got to do that. So in some ways, Europe has an advantage. There's a force happening, whereas in the US, it's like, oh, is this the right thing to do? I'm not just sure yet. I've got to think about it. Asia's already done it. It's on its way. So it's an interesting view of what's happening around the world. Different types of cultures doing different things, but it's very clear to me that Asia's driving at a pace, and we've got to catch up now.
Okay, and talking about these opportunities, going forward, what advice would you give to banks in the US and Europe?
I think we've moved to a state now where Europe and the US are at a very similar place. And effectively, it is how am I going to benefit from all this change? How am I going to change my bank to be able to address all of these opportunities? And I think they are still the cultural ones we talked about last time. They are still about the business cases. But I think it's getting to a point of saying, actually, it's not just putting my toe in the water and doing the minimum that I need to do, which, you know, frankly, a lot of people around the world have done. It is about saying, no, this is a big change. This is going from analog to digital. What am I going to have to do to really make that change happen? And that isn't just about doing the minimum pieces to make regulation work, or to say, yes, I've got a real-time payment. It's more about how do I change the internals of the bank to address this opportunity and get us focused for the next 5-10 years, because it'll take that long.
And finally, Paul, the debate in May, what do you think we can expect to hear?
I think we'll be hearing from the major banks about what it is they are thinking about doing. They're going to test and question some of the opportunities that they think they can see. And I think they'll be looking for both input and advice from around the world. And of course, what we've seen from last year was about 350 executives talking to us. And it's that information that we want to share with and enrich to try and have a better discussion and try and help people get on the right path to make their bank a digital bank.
Well, Paul, there's some things to really look forward to there. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.